Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another session of Focus on Liberia, where we talk everything finance, business, and economics. It's a pleasure to be with you here today. My name is Gabriel Carter. My co-host today is Alice Coffey, as always. Today topic will be about curbing illicit financial flow in Liberia. So that's what's going to be our topic today: financial flow, curbing illicit financial transaction or flow in Liberia today. This is what we're going to talk about today. Again, it's a pleasure being with you here today. Wherever you are, thank you for joining us. Please take a moment, share the podcast or show it if you want to call it that, and join us. And we would like to welcome your answer. I mean your questions. Sometime during the show, we will take questions and we'll take time and respond to your questions. But again, today that's what we want to talk about: the flow of illicit financial transaction in Liberia. And I have nobody else who's better to equipped to talk about that than Alice Coffey, who was the former head of the FIU, which is a financial intelligence unit in Liberia. I think for the bulk of his career, that's probably where he spent most of his time. And he has a very depth of knowledge on that. So we're going to be picking his brain today. Today, I'm just going to play host to talk to Alex about this current topic. Again, Alex, Depu, thank you for joining us. Hopefully, you can add to that as well. But Alex, welcome. Depu will be joining us as well. So usually there's, we there usually two of us or three of us. Today we have uh, Depu joining us here today. But Alex, please introduce yourself. I want in that introduction. I know you usually talk about go in depth in detail about your background in the FIU unit and what you guys did there as part of that introduction. Because I know everybody know you when you introduce yourself, but I want you in specific to that topic. Uh, do a little bit of extensive introduction, if you will, please. Thank you.
So, thank you, Gabriel, for that brief introduction of the show, and also Mr. Depu Zuo.
Yeah, after you,
Welcome
then I'll let him introduce
to the
himself.
program today. So, okay, so with respect to actually my latest um, area of specification or expertise has been over the past 7 years or so has been into financial crimes. All right, investigations, policies, writing laws, drafting. Basically, I from 2014 up to 2019, I set up the Financial Intelligence Unit of Liberia. So the process started in 2010 with the West African, the ECOWAS. So ECOWAS formed the what we call the JABA, the West African communities portion of the anti-money laundering group.
Mhm.
Okay, so as you know, the whole anti-money laundering thing started somewhere in the 80s or so, where as a result of illicit movement of drugs, drug trade, and the money emanating from there, and people putting it in the bank, utilizing the financial system, sort of for criminal transactions. So
Yep.
it led to the formation by the G7, the group of seven nations, the wealthiest nation, of forming what we call today the body that is responsible for monitoring money laundering and terrorist financing in the world, that is based in France. So that
Yep.
mandated the countries around the world to form um, regions. So different regions form their own unit. So in West Africa, around 2008,
Mhm.
they started that whole process. It started with Ghana, Nigeria, and 2010 they went to Liberia. So there were interaction from between the central bank of Liberia and the Ministry of Finance,
Yeah.
and eventually the central bank took control of the situation and then they wrote some, they conducted what we call the mutual evaluation. There was a report that came. It's like an assessment of where the country is
In terms
in
of
terms of
yeah,
implementing this particular mandate that has been, that the whole world was grabbing with.
right.
Okay, so that those recommendations, one of them was putting in laws. There are several of them. There's a whole booklet putting
Yeah.
in laws from the FIU. Then eventually the FIU laws and all the initial draft laws were done, and they were enacted by the legislature and approved by the president. And so in 2014, there was a vigorous competitive recruitment process,
Hmm.
because that was required, because they had to satisfy the JABA, the ECOWAS group,
Yeah.
right? There was it's not like the president just handpicked somebody and appointed the person, but it has to be through a competitive bidding process. Prior to that, I was already in the country. I was, recruited by the U.S. government on
Now
the
this wasn't in the 80 though, right? This was
no, there was all
this
in the 2000. So I went
2000.
to
Okay. All right.
Liberia I left the U.S. I was recruited
Right.
by the United States government under the GMAP,
Right.
the Governance and Economic Management Assistance Program, that was intended to revamp the financial of the country, the policies and all that after the war. So in 2006, I was recruited as part of financial experts from the world.
Hmm.
People came from Canada, people came from America. I was there for 4 years, and then after that, I started. I did that. I was based at the airport, but I basically did some work with all the state-owned enterprises, the Freeport, the federal, the LPRC, the Petroleum Refining Company, the
Hmm.
Forestry Development Authority, and I did some work with the Ministry of Finance as well, with all
Now,
the
quick,
PFM law and other
let
stuff.
me hold you right there. Was those work that you did with those other state-owned enterprises? Was it uh something in terms of work related to curbing financial flow, or was it something different from that?
Where it was basically stopping the bleed, if you say
Stopping the
fighting
bleed. Okay.
corruption.
All right.
So
Okay.
yeah, so it could be a subset of illicit financial flows.
Right.
But specifically, the FIU work is the
Right.
one that is, really tied into illicit financial flow. But corruption being a subset of illicit financial flow, and corruption is a predicate offense for money laundering.
Hmm. Hmm.
So yes, so it was part of that process.
Okay.
So after that, then eventually, 2014, I was interviewed with, I think it was 6 or 7 other people that applied that were shortlisted.
Hmm.
And then I was appointed by the president after that interview process. Then I started the FIU recruiting people, putting all the structure in place. I mean, we started from like ground
When you
zero.
say president, you mean President, the former
President
President
Ellie
Sirleaf?
Johnson Sirleaf, the
Okay.
president
All
of the
right.
Republic of Liberia.
Okay. All
So
right.
we started the FIU. The laws were already there, so we had the laws, but we had to write the regulations and all the different regulations. So sometimes people would say, "But Alex, you could be a good lawyer because you're already dealing with lawyers and writing, these regulations and stuff like that." And so, quite recently, the U.S. government, through the U.S. embassy, kind of applauded
The work
the
of the
FIU,
FIU.
the
Right.
FIU
Right.
for the recent action they took in freezing the assets of a what we'll call a shell company
A
in
shell
Liberia.
company. Right. Right.
And I am so excited about that. I am
Okay.
so excited that
We will
the
get
work
into
that I
that.
the work that I started is paying off, and I like to congratulate the Financial Intelligence Unit of Liberia for
Yeah.
taking that bold step. I joined the U.S. Embassy to do that because I did a lot of work with the U.S. Treasury, the U.S. Embassy, World
Mhm.
Bank, and all those people to get to where I left it. And Mr. Harris came and picked up from where I started, and he's carrying it forward, and I
That
must congratulate him too.
yeah. No, that is. I think that is great news. Despite everything else that is happening, as you and I both know, all of us here know. I think that is a great news to hear in terms of the work that is being done at the FIU, especially in terms of curbing the illicit financial flow. So we will get into that, but before that, let me have Depu introduce himself, and then I know he's a regular here, but I just want to afford him the time to introduce himself. Depu, welcome. Nice to see you. You seem awful lot quiet today, my man. Uh, please introduce yourself.
Don't mind that. Put that way he can act.
You're muted.
Please.
Good afternoon and good evening to our people in Liberia. My name is Depu Zuo, back here today. I think I'm still providing policy consultancy in Liberia in terms of development, economic policy issue. And I love doing that because it's good to be expert in your own country before you go out.
Yeah.
So for the past years, I work for African Capacity Building Foundation, and Ministry of Planning, and later on in government. And I think I have some level of work with the establishment of the FIU, working with ECOWAS community group, and at the same time serving on the board in the end. So it's good to have Alex with us today as me discussant and also an author who want to look through his material. And I think this is another opportunity of creating gray area or clearing a gray area for Liberia's development, so that let's see some of the things that they clear it and see how best we can improve it. And I think that the illicit financial flow is something that we need to look at. Quite interestingly, I would like for you, maybe I want to share with people by email, this illicit financial flow report for Africa in 2020, it came out in 2021. I've used that also to teach my students at the University of Liberia and AMEU. So I probably think we can search into that and see how this is, how illicit financial flow is affecting Africa. About $88 billion. He's talking about $88 billion lost as a result of illicit financial flow. So
that's annually, right?
Right?
Annually, yearly.
Annually.
Yeah.
And that is more than aid. That is more than the aid that we're receiving.
Yeah.
That's exactly.
So it's something that we have to look at as country, as a continent. It's something we need to look at carefully.
Okay.
Thank you.
No, thank you. I think that is. Please, I think you should have an email, so you can just forward that to us. But while you sending that to us, I want us to dive into this. So Alex, you alluded to the U.S. Embassy recently commending the FIU unit about the work that they're doing by freezing that shell company assets. So I want you to maybe go. I know you did mention a little bit about that, but I want you to go a little bit into that, and in that process, maybe help us, for the audience, what is illicit financial flow or transaction? What is classified as that? Or talk to us about the that freezing of that shell company in Liberia. And I'm sure there's 100 more out there that need to be frozen, but that one was picked out. But so talk to us about the recent embassy comment, and then maybe define what is illicit financial flow for our audience in the process.
Yeah. So what happened? And I mean, during my time at the FIU too, we also did a lot of freezing. Okay, and in fact, we did a lot of cases that also went to court. And in fact, one of the cases that we did also it ended up in the ECOWAS court, because the guys that were involved from different countries also took Liberia to court after we froze the money. The Ministry of Justice froze their assets. One of the now defunct banks. They took up the case with at the ECOWAS court. So what happened is that one of the problems that we have in Liberia and around the world, it's just not in Liberia alone, but in this case we're talking about Liberia, is what we call the shell company, right?
Yeah. There's music. There's somebody noise in the background. Is that coming from any of you?
Thanks for me.
No, that's yeah. Somebody. Okay. Sorry, Alex, for cutting you off, but yeah, go ahead. Yeah. Yeah, I'm still hearing it. But anyway, it's not
No,
loud. So sorry. Go ahead.
I'm testing my thing. I'm putting. It's not coming from me now, so I'm
Yeah,
testing
it's
it
not
by
coming
putting
from
on
you. It's
mute
not
and
coming.
see.
Maybe it's from Dennis. Maybe it's from Dennis. But anyway, sorry. I
Okay,
apologize.
people come to a country and form what a company. They go through the registry, the business registry,
Hmm.
register a company, and part of the process to open a bank account, you have to have a business registration certificate.
Yeah.
So the register companies, they they don't have employees, they don't have an office. They open a company, then they move monies, right? A lot of the times they move these monies. That's the illicit. Illicit means criminal, right?
Yeah, legal.
It's wrong.
Yeah.
And flow mean move.
Hmm.
So illicit financial flow is to move criminal
Illegal.
money from country to country across borders.
Yeah.
And how do you move this money? You do not put this, yeah, they got cross-border movement of money, but bulk of this money is moved through the financial system, through the banks, through wire transfer and other means, right?
Hmm.
All these different payment methods, whether it's mobile money, whether it's electronic, the EFT, electronic fund transfer,
Yeah.
these methodologies can also be used by criminals. Okay, the same way the wire transfer is being used. So there are different crimes, whether it be corruption. So I would try not to mention countries, but where it's specific, I will mention. I would try not to mention names, but where it's specific, I would do that.
We are being specific to Liberia here. So, and I think we will get into Africa later on with
No,
that.
but I'm talking about Liberia, but I'm talking about
Yeah.
the monies that are coming from other countries to Liberia
Okay.
and where
Okay.
it's going.
Got it.
All right.
Got it. Yep.
So people, even in West Africa, so let's narrow it to West Africa. So, for example, a certain oil-rich country in West Africa, which is noted for corruption.
Yeah.
People are there corrupting money from other oil wells or different things, and then they try to find a way to move that money. But you know, the money laundering called, they say what? Placement, right? And then finally integrate. All right. Placement, layering, and integration. Placement is to put the money into the bank. Layering is to move it, create all kinds of means for you to obscure the original source of the money, or the formation of the company is to obscure tracing to the what we call the beneficial owner. The beneficial owner are the ultimate people that benefit from the movement of that money.
Right.
So they come to Liberia, set up a shop, register a company, and purport that they're doing all business. Like this company, Colan, they say they're doing investment business, right? Mm-hmm. So they move the money, and it stays there. They move additional money. They move that money through wire transfer to another country. And you know where these monies end up? It's either in the United States, in Switzerland, eventually in other tax havens and things like that. Sometimes they move this money for terrorist financing.
Yeah.
They move this money for terrorist financing. So they form shell company. Shell company can be used for legal purposes. It can also be used for illegal purposes. So this Colan came to Liberia, established a company, and started moving assets. Then they opened bank account with almost all the banks.
Yeah.
All right. So, and the FIU has some powers to do some temporary freezing. So what happened is, through the FIU investigations, okay, so what happens is normally the banks, under the regulation called the Suspicious Activity Report, the banks are required to report to the FIU anything they find suspicious. You don't have to investigate. Once you think it's suspicious, and there are different yardsticks, right?
Of suspicions, right?
Yeah, there are different red flags that will show that the person is behaving suspicious. And the banks know their customers very well, okay? So when there's a reason to believe that this company or this person is engaged in what would be money laundering, a report is sent to the FIU. Then the FIU does an investigation. Okay. Once the FIU does this investigation, if it finds out this, for example, in this case of this company, then one of the things to do is to stop them right away, is to freeze.
Right.
To freeze the asset.
Part of that investigation has to, at the beginning, it has to do with monitoring the account. So if they report it, the first thing they do, they monitor it first, right? They start monitoring all those accounts that individual owns or company owns.
Yeah, I won't go into the tactics, the different tactics, but on the surface, there's a law that requires, there's regulation that implement the law that requires financial institutions, banks, all bank financial institution, non-bank financial institution, and what we call domestic designated non-financial business and professional, lawyers, accountants, casinos, all right?
Shadow financials, right?
Yeah, they are supposed to make a report if they notice anything funny. And the FIU also does its own monitoring. It does its own inspection by its law. So in different ways, but in this specific case, so the FIU start, they do their analysis, do their investigation. Sometimes they get the police involved. Sometimes they get the National Security Agency involved. Sometimes they get LACC, Anti-Corruption Commission involved. All right. So, and I got to say thank you to Lafayette Gu, Councillor Lafayette Gu as well. Because when we formed what we call the Financial Crime Working Group, these were guys, Gatot Tate, Lafayette Gu. There are some lawyers that we built relationship with. And we train, we provided, they're trained in the law, but in the anti-money laundering stuff, that we're trying to build these soldiers to make sure they act. And he took a bold step through, the FIU took a bold step, especially in these times, right? Because I can tell you from my experience, corruption fight back, and illicit financial flow people fight back.
Yeah,
they got contacts with people in the justice system. They got contact even as far as the president.
Yeah.
Right, and they fight back. I remember some freezing things that we went to do. It backfired, my friend. You got lawmakers coming, calling my phone day and night. You got people from business places. I won't call names. There's a specific person who is in politics now who will call you. Apparently, the person was just involved in every case. They will call you, and you have to be strong.
Yeah,
you got to be strong, and that is why I'm excited for what happened, right? Because even though, yes, under my regime, there are a lot of freezing we did as well. There are a lot of cases we did, but to the extent that it has come to this public glare, right? And the U.S. government and the reason why the U.S. government commending us is also because the U.S. government also has spent a lot of human resources on working with the FIU. You will note that the latest sanction list on Liberia, and I can disclose to you that the FIU also had a lot of cooperation. Right? Okay. And I will stop there. But the reason why is that in 2000, around 2014, 15, 16, thereabout, we entered, Ellen Johnson Sirleaf had gone to a meeting in the States, one of these spring meetings, these IMF World Bank meetings. And she was approached about illicit financial flows and all that stuff, FIU in Liberia, right? And she said, oh yeah, we have an FIU, right? We have an FIU in Liberia and blah, blah, blah. You say, okay, but we need your help. So she kind of asked for help, and she left the meeting, she came back. Somehow, I was contacted by US Treasury directly. Say, my friend, your president, blah, blah, blah. Okay. So Gabriel, I can tell you this, that then I had to visit, they invited me to visit the Treasury. I used my own money because the government could not give me money. I used my own money to travel to the United States, rented a car, went to Washington, D.C., held a meeting with the U.S. Treasury. That resulted into the agreement between the U.S. Treasury to work with the Financial Intelligence Unit to help to improve the Financial Intelligence Unit. And that kind of strengthened. So the U.S. government, through the U.S. Treasury, has this understanding with Liberia through the FIU. And they have put men on the ground. They used to come quarterly. So for this to happen, they too, they have also succeeded. Even though it's just one.
It's one of many. It's one of many.
During my administration, during the Elling's time, there was a lot of stuff that happened.
Right.
But during this time, because of what is going on and all that stuff, the fact that, we think the country thinks that, corruption, they're not fighting corruption, this government is not fighting corruption. So among all these things, for this particular case to spring up, that is why the U.S. Treasury is giving kudos to the FIU to encourage them on.
Yeah,
and we all, and I sit here today under my voice that I congratulate Edwin Harris and the FIU and all those people that we helped to recruit that are the entire staff of the FIU. I am excited, and I say kudos to you all.
Thank you. Thank you for that. That was quite of an extensive question in there. Next time I'll hold you to 2 minutes.
I've
been trying to cut you off. I've been trying to cut you off, but you kept going. I said, all right, let me let you.
I'm excited, my friend. You can't stop a moving train, my friend.
Depu, I know you talked about. I know you talked about the recent report that came out. In giving us a background on that, could you talk about the impact on the country's economy of the flow of illicit financial flow, right? What it does to the country economy. But I want you to give us a background of the research that you just shared with us.
Gabriel, thank you very much. But I just wanted to ask Ellis first because
go ahead.
There was a need for us to improve Liberia's image on this whole OECD report.
Yep.
As Liberia being one of the 7 jurisdictions of uncooperative transparency tax haven.
Mm-hmm.
How do you describe it? How can we consider that now?
So Alex, answer that question. Then I think you will. That's a direct question.
Yes. In the initial stages, yes, we have some issues, right? And uncooperated to the extent that when it came to terrorism, the fight against terrorism, our law was flawed. Especially, there are certain things that were missing in our laws when it comes to, say, financing individual terrorists and different things. Sometimes, and being the head of the FIU and dealing with writing of laws and regulations, we found out that sometimes when we're writing laws in our country, we write the law as if to say we are going to be in this seat forever. We write the law to favor us. We write the law, so our laws, especially the laws on terrorism, they are benchmarks. In this whole AML, anti-money laundering threat, the Financial Action Task Force, the FATF, we call it for short, we call it FATF, that administer the whole thing. They have guidelines, basic guidelines you have to follow. If you miss one letter, you're not compliant. So yes, we were not compliant at a certain time, and we had to rewrite that laws. That was another fight.
Okay, so thank you for the.
So we were, in fact, we were downgraded as a result. We were nearly blacklisted, in fact, but we fought around the clock with support from the president, with support from the then central bank governor, and we made that happen. So we were not blacklisted. And sometimes some of this report is like credit report. Your credit score now, I don't care how you fix the credit, it will stay there for some few years. Yeah.
It's a good analogy. I like that.
Yes, that's true, Ellis. But the thing about it is that in the African Union report, where they also indicated this OECD report that was done in 2002, where Liberia was considered as tax haven and non-cooperative tax haven.
Yep.
So, and I'm glad that you clarified that. It's something that we need to look at carefully. But then that will take me into the question that Gabriel asked. Realistically, if a country is designated as a country that is a tax haven and also illicit financial flow, one of the things it does to the economy there is that it brings credibility problem for major investors to consider you insecure area. Because realistically, no one is going to do business with you when you have some illegal transaction that are there, and major corporations thinking that they need that transparency in terms of transaction across the globe. They cannot interact with you. So as a country, it's always good to work on that. And being one of the committee members who initiated the work on this whole process, it's something we got to work on that and Liberia to improve it. I'm glad that it was done. The only problem with Liberia, which I always say, is that issue of implementation of policy. Policy implementation is a challenge. If we really want to do good for ourselves, Marshall Island, Liberia, all these places that were all of us were considered as a tax haven. These countries are all rich countries, unlike Liberia. Liberia is the only area that you see that you have illicit financial flow going on at the same time is in them with poverty.
Yep.
And, you can't believe it that other nations that are doing this are doing it because they got wealthy people and they got money there. Now, the Liberian economy is also being hit as a result of this. I can tell you clearly that in terms of simple way that this thing can hit the poor is where when mobile money or money grant and the rest of transfer that would depend on has challenges, that why people transfer money to Liberia and some people start to have some cuts and some people start being blacklisted. Because the country is not safe, they cannot allow you to do remittances. And majority of our people live on these remittances for survival. So when there's any decision from international financial institution where you are being blacklisted, automatically it affects the poor. And that's one aspect that Ellis need to stress on, because when you look at it, transfer of money between companies, banking transaction, is easily for their transaction purpose or investment purpose.
Yep.
But were you to say just the season, Christmas season, Liberians have 10,000 people depending on remittance from family members in the US. Were there to be any transaction or blockish from the money grant or Western Union or any action, they affect the economy. The next thing that the Liberian government still need to work on, and is also helpful for all of us to understand, is that when they say illicit financial flow is not only the cash, anything that you can liquid, in fact, in terms of diamond, goods that can be transacted within the process, the period. Right now, drugs, illicit drugs that go along with, because there'll be a drugs money, a drugs law who is lying down in Nigeria or somewhere in Spain will say, okay, I can clean my money in Liberia and enter Liberia with it in the split second and process it and get some US dollar out. And that's what we call money laundering. So all of these things have effects on the economy were you to be listed or were you to be considered as a country that has challenges in terms of illicit financial flow. So
well, Depo, you're right. So let me leave my state of excitement now and come to the real stuff. Okay. So Gabriel, I'll take on my excitement now.
All right. I think that's great, because I have this next question for you that I.
But I mean, Depo is right, because there are a lot of things that are going on in our country, even besides the fact that the laws were not good, even way before then, right? way before then, even way before the FIU started, Liberia was, if you look at different reports, Liberia was a destination for illicit financial flow. What Liberia was considered as a destination. Is Liberia out of the woods as a destination for illicit financial flow? No. Liberia, not because we scored this one achievement, which was recognized. But Liberia is still the destination of illicit financial flows. In as much as you have, and I'm saying these things based on the work that I did in Liberia, okay? Even though I'm not going to cite specific cases, but I'm making it as simple as possible, but this is based on my experience in Liberia and as the head of the FIU. We talk about companies in Liberia, right? Out of Liberia, people out of Liberia who were moving monies in Liberia and moving it out. Companies that are set up shop who are actually doing business in Liberia, but are evading taxes by obscuring their actual funds by using different methodology, right? Which denied Liberia of needed taxes. We have people in Liberia, corrupt public officials, right? Who are also using established businesses to move their monies, their corrupt money for them. We have public officials who are using the VIP terminal at the airport to move thousands of dollars, if not in the millions of dollars, through the airport. Physical movement of cash. All right. So corrupt officials connive with business people, well-established business people. They move their money. Now, what you have now is you have also corrupt officials who are conniving with, who have also formed shell companies. Now you see that people, when you see, for example, when you see one project at the ministry, they conducting the same project 2-3 times, then you know that corruption money. These are some of the indicators, right? That means, and the same company, check behind that company and see whether that company is properly registered and whether that company is actually doing business. So you have government officials, lawmakers who have shell companies as well, just to channel money. There were some reports during all these audits that were conducted during Judy Bryant time, for example. Some examples were there that people and it happened even up to today. Now, the next thing you see is people are using real estate to channel their corruption money into real estate. You see horses flying here and there. Normally in Liberia, an average person would take 5 to 10 years to build a house. But these days, sometimes in 6 months, houses are built. And that's one of the, when I was head of the FIU, Mr. Francis Dennis was on the board. And that was one thing he always hit my head about, right? This real estate that was springing up, he said, Alex, you got to look into the real estate. Alex, you got to look into the real estate. And people are channeling illegal funds into building real estate. Now, they know that the FIU is there. The FIU they know that FIU is in another country, so they will, when you send the money through wire transfer, they will flag. So they're using these companies to transfer these corrupt. They're using these shell companies to transfer this corrupt money out of the country, and it impedes economic development. And like Depu said, this you're talking about around almost 90 billion per year. I mean, all the countries combined, all the African countries combined, right? It's not just Liberia alone. All the countries combined.
Yeah, African countries.
Yeah, African countries combined. Almost 90 billion per year. It used to be small and it's raising. And that is higher than the aid that is coming to to these countries, right, in Africa.
Let me ask you a question.
Yes, go ahead.
On the real estate, as you mentioned, we have, you said properties springing up within a period of 6 months. Do we have a builder permits for people to build? Like, let's say you want to build a house, right? You go to whatever your state or county or your city to
Mhm.
require permit. Do we have that processes in Liberia, or anybody can just build? I suppose from what I'm seeing, people just build houses without going for permits or zoning codes or all of that, right? And if that's the case, then I think that is the loophole that need to be closed in order to track that process of people using construction to for lack of better words, wash their money to launder money, right? um, eh, so I wanted to ask that to both of you. Do we have a process? Let's say I live in Cinco, I want to build 6 units in Cinco. Do I have to go to the city hall, get a permit, say this is what they give me a zoning code to say this is what I'm going to build, this is how much property I'm going to build, is a 2-family, 3-bedroom,
Gabriel,
do we have that? If we
yeah.
don't, then that could be the loophole that needs to be closed.
Listen, before
You
Ellis
guys are
comes
laughing, but
in,
I'm serious.
now before Ellis comes in, Gabriel, let me say this. Realistically, what you are discussing, building permit and other things, what is very much important for us to know there is in terms of knowing the sources of illicit fund and other things. Construction period is one thing, the ownership is another thing. I think what is important, and from all indication here, is that asset declaration and ownership is very much paramount, and it is now something that is now enacted into law. It's not only for public official, but private, and every citizen is supposed to go beyond that to make sure that the asset declaration. So when a company registered today in Liberia declare its assets, including the capital, the fund disclosed, and whatever that is acquired annually is supposed to be declared. With that transparency, that financial transparency, is something that will help. In fact, it's one of the arguments that in recent time we have put up with this whole ArcelorMittal noise are coming, because ArcelorMittal Liberia does not have any financial report on its website to tell you their performance or any other thing. But indeed, you can only go to ArcelorMittal Global Holding to see whatever transaction that you can get. So it's something that it has to be enforced. Our legal system and our law enforcement officers and policy makers supposed to make sure that we have these things.
Wait, did you say that if you wanted to see the financial documents for a Salamito, you have to go to them? Do they not file taxes? You can't determine that from their taxes to see how much uh, money they're making?
Go to see their financial report, where you see on their global financial report and giving you all of the asset in terms of liability statement, financial statement. I haven't seen it on ArcelorMittal Liberia, unless it is done recently. So you can know the operation cost. So there's dividend declaration is a problem as we speak right now for
So
Liberian
people they
government.
don't file taxes in Liberia?
They do file taxes.
Oh, they
So
do.
we should be able to determine that. The government should be able to determine that from their taxes.
That's different topic. Let's go with this one first. Let's leave it. I'm just giving.
Yeah, Gabriel,
Hallelujah.
you're entering into different terrain when it comes to the building
No,
thing.
it's I don't think it's a different terrain. If you want to, let's say
No,
Asylum
but
is
give me chance.
property.
Let me learn now.
No, no, let me just say that,
Okay.
and you can. Let's say you build. We have this property that you guys are in, right? It's a 6 units, and they say, okay, it's belongs to Asylum Intel, right? And from last year, Asylum Intel filed taxes. I'm just using this from a hypothetical standpoint, right? For let's say 20 million, and you look at that property, you say, hey, this building alone is worth 30 million. You should be able to look at that taxes from their filing from you, the government, which you're supposed to use to be able to determine their tax, the tax they're supposed to pay, to look at that and say, okay, there's a big discrepancy here. How did they get that extra 10 million to build a 30 million property when they only made 20 million? That's the point that I'm trying to get to. It's the basic thing that makes up the framework of
Yeah, Gabriel, companies, it's part of the tax code in Liberia. Companies are, in fact, that's why they have the people are accredited, they are given license as tax preparer in Liberia. Auditing firms, are given license. They have a different organization for that, and it's embedded in our tax code. Some of that is, on the public entity side, is even embedded in the PFM law, that companies are supposed to file the annual tax return. To the extent that it applies to Metasti and all these other big giant companies that could be working in Liberia, yes, they are also required to submit certain reports. All right. So because they pay taxes in Liberia, all right. Yeah, even though we don't have restriction on repatriating profits and all that stuff, but they pay their taxes, so they're supposed to lodge their statement about the payment of the taxes. So yes, from an auditing perspective, when I was in auditing, yes, companies are required by the company's code in Liberia to file their annual taxes. And I know, for example, they do because one of the things that impacted on our revenue, I think in 2009, was the fact of this presumptive tax. So when you take the tax up front from the person on the sales, on the gross sales, at the end of the year, when the person filed their taxes, and the person take all their expenses, because you took it at gross, then when the person take all the expenses in and then they end up with a negative, then you owe the person. Then you say, oh, you're carrying it forward to the next year. So it import government revenue for the next year because now losses are carried forward. So yes, they file the taxes. On the building permitting, I would tell you, my friend, we got good laws in Liberia. But the implementation, we got zoning laws, we got building permits.
The point of having good
building
laws,
permits. We have all those laws. When I did doing better business in Liberia, that's when I learned a lot of this stuff. Or when I bought property in Liberia, the surveyor took 25, because my place is on the roadside, so he counted 25 feet from the middle of the road there. Then he counted, so my acre of land, he counted another one. He put the alleyway there. So I think for every, if I'm not mistaken, for every two acre, there's an alleyway.
Yeah,
all those things are set in Liberia.
Right.
Yeah, but all those things are set in Liberia.
I
but
know
we break the law. People are selling.
Yeah, but we don't.
Today, as I said here now, I'm fighting from here. I'm fighting somebody who is land sellers who are selling land in the alleyway where my house is. I'm just about to prevailing land in the alleyway.
All right. I know we went off a tangent here. We went off a tangent, and I take the responsibility for that, for bringing off a tangent, but going for us.
That's why I was telling you that we're going.
Let me bring us back to. Let me bring.
I'm trying to get some information here, Alex.
Yes.
In 2018, in this illicit financial flow report from Africa report, it's indicated that Liberia in 2018 has almost like 98% 98 cases of illicit financial flow, that cases that are connected to financial crimes and other things. And in this report that as I'm looking at here, Liberia has suspicious transaction report in connection with other economic and financial crimes compared to that of Mali, Guinea, and other countries. It is only Liberia, Cote d'Ivoire, and Nigeria that have higher mark in terms of suspicion transaction report with economic and financial crime. And we don't see that in Ghana, Burkina Faso, Senegal, Togo, Gambia, Guinea, Guinea-Bissau, in the ECOWAS region. Why Liberia, particularly Liberia, Cote d'Ivoire, and Nigeria having this report connection with economic and financial crime?
Alex, that's a question to you. Why is there? It seemed to be skewed in Liberia, Ivory Coast, and what was the other country, Depu?
Yeah, financial crime.
Right, financial crime.
Okay, you say we have more reports?
Yeah, economic and financial crime. Other countries have crime, but when it comes to economic and financial crime, you have Liberia having Cote d'Ivoire, Liberia, and Nigeria specifically having high number compared to other West African countries. I think I sent a report. Yes, that's what in 2018 report.
Yeah, if you talk about a report, that every country is supposed to submit the suspicious activity report numbers, right?
Mm-hmm.
That is how they measure the performance of the FIU through the statistics. Okay, so the statistics that go to every month, every quarter, say all the reports that the bank submit, how many are those? Say if they send 100, how many were looked at by the FIU? All right. How many were sent to competent authority? Competent authority meaning those who are in charge of the actual investigation. So if it's corruption, it go to LACC. If it's other crime, if it's security, terrorism, it goes to NSA. If it's tax evasion, it goes to LRA. So how many of those that the FIU disseminated, how many were investigated, how many ended in court? So the question is, so the measurement, the value chain is that, say for example, you get 100 cases from the banks to FIU. FIU decided, oh, some of them, they don't worth it, okay, after the investigation. So maybe 60 worth it, or maybe 50 or 40 worth it. Because the percentage is the number of report to the percentage of cases, is the percentage of cases is lower because sometimes the bank just do indicators and send it to you. So you got to sift it. So you get smaller report than the number. But that number also goes to investigation. The investigator is supposed to go to court. So even if you have 100, at least 5 or 10 supposed to end up in court. All right, at the different levels of investigation.
I think that's the point he's trying to get
to.
Yeah.
So I'm just trying to put his something in context. Yeah. So if 5 to 10 go to court, we should have about another maybe 3, 4, 5, if there are 10, maybe guilty verdict. And out of that, we should have asset recovery, right?
Yeah.
We should sort of be freeze. We're supposed along the way, along the investigation way, there's freezing that is conducted, like in this case of the case that we highlighting here today, the Colon. It still had to go to court, even though there's freezing order. The freezing order is intended to stop them from operating the bank account. The asset is frozen, right? But they still have to go to court. And if they are found guilty, the asset, if the asset was derived from criminal activity, that asset will be sent back to the. If that asset came from different country, then Liberia and that other country will collaborate and will send that other country to that country, right? So that's what we're saying. If the asset belongs to Liberia have to now, recover that asset to Liberia.
That was not happening. So the question here is that correlate. I think what he's trying to get to, does the high number correlate
cases
exactly to cases?
You got high number of cases on Liberia.
It was implied. It wasn't directly stated.
Right. I understand.
And besides that, I'm not cutting you, Alex. Besides that, they talk about non-renewable, resources crime. It's very high in Liberia. That means that non-renewable resources are something that, like the mineral, are non-renewable. And the crime is very high. If you look at the report, it's clear that, look, we have almost 400 cases of non-renewable resource crime. At the same time, we have 98 cases of suspicious transaction in one country. That's 2018 report.
So answering that question, can you talk about what are some of the tools that are used to detect illicit money transaction? Because I think that will better help you flow into that question.
Debu, I'm explaining to you the way the FIU works and the way the anti-money laundering program works in any country. So I don't know what report you are reading, but I'm explaining to you in the best way that it works. So if you say the number of cases that Liberia reported is higher in Liberia than Nigeria, in Nigeria and other places, no. If the more number you report, that means you are doing your work. The more suspicious transactions that are reported to the FIU, and the more the FIU disseminate, that means the FIU is being effective.
Now, then the question here, this is why I'm asking you the question. Reporting the cases, and is that a resolution of the problem?
Yeah, correlation to indictment.
No, it is not the resolution of the problem.
So identification of the crime is one thing, and the prosecution of the crime is another.
So it's a contra effectiveness, right? Because they got technical effectiveness, technical compliance and effectiveness compliance. So at that stage, the country is technically, effectively non-compliance. Because, say the FIU is doing its work, right? Because if you look at the FIU work, it's like you were the number 6 on the football field, right? Just conceptualize the 11 players on the football
distribution
field. So the number 6 collect the ball, dribble, and distribute it. So if the number 10 or the number 9 refuses to score, the number 9 being the judiciary, the number 10 being the Ministry of Justice or the other institutions, LACC, they have their own measurement. But overall, the country has a problem because the country is not being effective, and FIU is part of the country. Yeah, FIU may be doing its work. I remember one time we met a team of ambassadors selling a point. I was trying to sell a point for support. And at the end of the day, at the end of that brilliant presentation, the French ambassador was there, the Swedish ambassador was there. There were 4 of them. And I said, Alex, brilliant presentation, you make your case. We can see that the FIU is being effective, but all this thing we're talking at the end of the day is not going nowhere. Because the other entities have to play their part.
So that is my question to you then. Not just to you, but the rest of the... If you report...
So, Depu, did I answer your question?
Let Depu answer. I want to do you're on mute, Depu.
Now, Alex, he's coming in. He's coming in with some information, but all I'm looking for is that, identification of the crime is one thing, prosecuting people for the crime is another thing. Right. So the reality is you need to have people who identify, let's say 98 cases in 2018. At least we can say with the identification, prosecution took place and the rest of it. And I'm hearing from you, yes, it's good for us to be reporting. Reporting is a very good mechanism. It's a good method. But the problem that there is that prosecution and to discourage the act is another thing, because we can say crime rate in New York is at this level, but prosecution in New York is another thing. Crime rate in Monrovia has reduced by this number. When it comes to crime, Liberia is very good in terms of the crime rate in the reports, the illicit financial flow. Crime rate, you are good. But suspicion transaction, especially that has to do with economic relationship, economic transactions that are suspicious are more. And at the same time, non-renewable resources transactions are also more. What are we doing as a country? How do we address this issue? That's the question I'm asking you.
So I will
meaning that our gold, diamond, and all of these things, these are non-renewables. It's a crime. People are taking it out every day.
So Mr. Philip Snedo, made a comment here. I don't know whether you saw it. So he says, great discussion, Alex in the pool. Okay, good. So what's the way forward with our financial and economic challenges? We have had this issue since founding of our nation. Why can we enforce the law of the land to improve the life of the people? And that's a great comment there. Okay. So at the end of the day, he brings us to perspective. All these things we are making, all this talk we are talking, at the end of the day, it has to have an impact. The U.S. Embassy, like it praised us now on one freezing, it doesn't solve the economic problem of our country. Because as you know, illicit financial flows impede economic growth. It reduces the collection of tax revenue. So the way to do it, Mr. Snare, and then I would, in also responding to Depu's question, I was just using Mr. Snare's stuff as a way forward. But the way to do it is, my brother, I will always say, is leadership.
And implementation, I will add.
It's leadership. When I say leadership, I say the person at the top of the country. It's the political will. Because if the vision doesn't, if it doesn't flow from the top, other countries have been successful. I mean, you can't eradicate, even in the World Bank, the IMF, the GFF reports, they say to reduce illicit financial flow. It's difficult to say eradicate corruption. So it's difficult to say eradicate illicit financial flow. Your criminals will say operate. But how do you reduce it? It is by ensuring that all the institutions work, the political will to allow all the institutions to work, the will to ensure that the rule of law is applied to the letter. For example, this case that we're talking about today, the Cullen, when the FIU collaborated with other entities and the lawyer that sent the freezing order, Lafayette Gu, he had some backlash from his boss. But unfortunately, it was late. And unfortunately, apparently too, the US people eyes were on it too. So it was late because his boss wanted to fire him, but you remember his boss wrote him a letter trying to ask him to resign or fire him. So it backfired on him, but he took that brave move, right? So the fight against illicit finance is not just from external, it's also from internal. You have internal people fighting you. You have your own internal people. So it depends on leadership. It depends on good governance. It depends on the full implementation of the rule of law. The issue of impunity has permeated our society. That, but the other people were doing it, the other government were doing it, so what we can do it? Oh, they did it Charlie King Town, so we can do the same thing. Oh, that the thing we've been doing here. So corruption has a way of fighting back. Illicit financial flow has a way of fighting back. So if you have a leadership that have the political will, not window dressing, not cherry picking on cases, but as a whole, in total, it's a whole total thing. Because even the work of the FIU depends on the LRA to do the tax part. It depends on the LSCC. The LSCC depends on the Ministry of Justice to do the prosecution part. So along that value chain, and the Ministry of Justice, the prosecution, depends on the judiciary. Okay, so the leader must ensure that it rains down, so that to a greater extent, all these things will take place, so that we can send more cases to court and move this impunity thing, so that people can be afraid. Yeah, if you do something in Liberia, you'll be sent to court, and if you're found guilty, this is what was going to happen to you, and it makes people afraid. But if we don't develop that culture through leadership, it's going to be difficult.
Okay, thank you, Ellis. I will still come back. But one of the things I also observe is that if we talk about financial transparency, where do we start from? Do we start from the business registry or annual report from financial institution, or what is it that we want to be doing to improve this? Because it started from this illicit financial flow has shown that countries that actually exercise financial transparency in terms of investment or the information clarity, these countries are easily out of conflict and they have improved their economy faster than countries that have actually reneged on financial transparency.
That's what I was saying with
great question, Depu. Right. Great question. And it starts from, like, for example, illicit financial flows share company. It starts from business registry, and that's one of the things that is on the table. That's one of the recommendations of the ECOWAS group, the JABA, in their mutual evaluation report. That because what happens is the business registry, it is not that equipped. All the business registry does is they collect your information, register your company. They check whether the company is not in existence. But normally, they are supposed to have the tools and the manpower, some investigation team to go after. You have to, if you register in a company, I register a company in the United States, for example, there are things that you go through. But there has to be a process where sometimes there has to be the same way when you open your bank account in with the bank. They do their KYC, they know your customer. Sometimes they visit, if you're not employed, they visit your place. Right? So the business registry should take it a step further. And the FIU has worked with the business registry a lot of times. But the answer, the result we get is we don't have the resources. We don't have the resources. And
what I'm saying is that Alex, I'm not ready to say FIU, because see, the thing about it is that FIU is going to be taking on the responsibility to do almost everything when the laws at certain policy institutions have responsibility. NRC, for example, responsible for investment. So as NRC, it's on the books of the NRC to make sure that companies, all the investment companies that are in Liberia that register with them, make sure that they make their financial transaction public, transparent, that they do their annual report on their website, that they make sure that they declare, at least for here, in the United States, every time we say United States, you got to make sure that shareholders, are informed of what shares have been going out at the end of the year. So what is it that we do? FIU cannot go after that. What are the mechanisms or coordination framework? Which entity is responsible to do what? That this time now, we say by next year, okay, we fail on this one, so next year this one is responsible to do it. So that's a question I'm asking.
I'll answer you the question. I mentioned the FIU because the question you asked, it borders, there's some work that the FIU, so I was giving you a specific example. I'm not saying the FIU does everywhere, but technically, when it comes to financial flow, the FIU interacts with a lot of entities. All right, the FIU may be the FIU is like, it's 10 snakes in the green grass where you can see. Right, that's how the work is, but they interact with a lot of people. You know it, but for example, as a country, one of the problems we're challenged with is identification, both physical identification and personal identification. We don't have a formal address system. So even with, for example, that address system will help the Liberia Revenue Authority to know that their house is here, this new house is being built here to collect their property tax, right? So it also impacts the work of the business registry as well as the FIU or other institutions. So the fact that we don't have a proper physical and personal identification system in the country is a problem.
So Alex,
you get Social Security number, they can identify everybody. But Liberia is only the ID they started is only the government workers that have IDs.
I have a follow-up question. Yes. I have a follow-up question, right? So here.
No, wait, Gabriel, let people continue.
Yeah, but you see, the thing about it is that for businesses, you got business registration number, the TIN number. You know what I'm saying?
That was my question that I wanted to ask.
So if you have a business, for me, I have a situation right now that is still being investigated. I have the same name as the other entity name, but the difference there is that we have different acronym. But that means that business registry did not do due diligence, which of course they are working on that. But now, in terms of there is what we call tax identification number that is assigned to each business in Liberia. How do we trace and track these tax identification number? The LRA will have information that the Ministry of Commerce and NRC and all of these will have the information, so that if we go for annual registration, how do we sync it to know that, look, this guy, the moment you put a TIN number, it puts the business owner picture and every profile is there. Now, the same thing goes to central bank or wherever they pay their taxes. The moment you put a TIN number, it appears and you see the information clearly. How are we doing this? Does it have to go through the FIU, or how do we get hold of these things?
No, but when you talk about TIN, tax identification number is the Liberia Revenue Authority that issues tax. It's not the FIU, all right. And when a business is registered and is doing business, and it has to register with the LRA. But again, so the business registry, for example, right, supposed to have a registry of all businesses, which
correct,
the LRA is supposed to have access to, which the FIU is supposed to have access to, right?
Yes.
Which
yes.
other institutions of government supposed to have access to. Of course, the access will be restricted, but they're supposed to have access to it, right? We don't have that. Okay, so yes, the LRA will give TIN numbers, and I don't know the details of how they do that, all right? But it will give TIN number for businesses. Yeah, but do they have a serious address system where, yes, except for knowing where the business are by going there, foot soldier, but do you have an address system where even the LRA can collect its property tax just by knowing that
that is the problem we have, and I wanted to add to that question.
We have a whole entity in Liberia that is supposed to do this. A whole entity that's on a budget.
Let me add to that question. Let me lay this right. So I know both of you mentioned this. So over here, when you go register your company, like Depu said, they give you a tax identification number, right? You use that tax identification number to go open a business account. Now, at the registry, when you go register your company, you said exactly what that company is going to do, how many employees you expect to have in a year, and expected revenue you're supposed to make in a year, right? Those get reported not to the Secretary of State, it goes to the IRS. Now, at the end of the year, like Depu said, you file your annual registration, right? Your annual report, right? Now, in filing that annual report, you have to file your taxes as well. So it tells you, if let's say in your case, what you mentioned, where they pre-collect tax in Liberia, right? If you go, let's say we pre-collect a tax, and you go file your taxes, and you make more money, the government have the ability to collect that additional tax that they want to do, right? The question that I wanted to ask, I think Depu alluded to some of that, is how, what are the things that not just the FIU but the government as a whole does to make sure to track some of these things? If I register my company, I pay my taxes at the end of the year, right? Are you listening? You listening? You seem distracted. Okay, all right. If I register my company, I pay my taxes at the end. I pay my taxes at the end of the year, right? And if there's at the business registration, I would tell people, I tell the government, the Secretary of State in my state, how much I expect to make, right? The government, the IRS knows that as well. Now, if I have 5 employees and I told the people I'm supposed to be making, let's say, 1 million a year, and at the end of the year, I'm still with that 5 employee, but I'm making, let's say, 2.5 million without any justification in terms of transactions or increase in my transaction, that is a red flag. My question to both of you, I know both of you may have both of you worked in a system, is how does the government go through that process from the registration to the filing of taxes to make sure that if there any discrepancy in terms of reporting purposes, that get escalated, which is supposed to be to your division, which is the FIU, and the FIU bring it down the hammer to make sure to carry on the investigation to do that. What are the step-by-step process that the government has, right? And if they do, what are the step-by-step process that the government have?
Which government, which entity are you talking about? Maybe Depu can take a shot at that first.
Let me come in, Gabriel. Gabriel, I'm understanding what you're saying. You know, one of the Liberia Revenue Authority has that responsibility to do. In fact, first of all, what they do, and that we usually do, is to get what we call tax clearance. They give you tax clearance for 90 days, 180 days, depending on what period you're reporting. So it is an LRA responsibility to make sure that before you obtain your tax clearance for any transaction, they make sure that you declare almost everything that you've done and do your tax payment. It is from the tax payment they use to give you the tax clearance. So the question I'm asking Ellis earlier is that how do we hold, because in terms of financial transparency, the illicit financial flow, it cannot be detected by Ministry of, LRA. This is a work between the Ministry of, the LRA, the National Investment Commission, and the Ministry of Commerce, because these are people that are responsible for regulation of trade and businesses, and National Bureau of Concession. National Bureau of Concession will be in a position to really know whether these people are in compliance with other regulations in terms of their investment. So all of these units have to work together and see there should be a framework, a clearinghouse where they meet to be able to clear out issues for financial transparency. Without these things, it's very difficult. You continue to have a tax haven. Liberia will be considered as tax haven, which is always there, and will still be a crime haven. All of the time, the crime haven, because we are not being able to synchronize and use, let's say, digital system to report on some of these things. There should be a clearing system that you can know. If a business registered today, a new business registered today in Liberia, and a business having to hit the account with huge amount of money, which is suspicious, it has to be a letter in the system through FIU. And the NRC will be able to be informed, and the rest of that's the NBC will know that, oh, this guy has carried on this transaction. It's when you be able to track this, and that's what we call transparency. So instead of us saying, because let us not look meaning at the US system, but we have a simple system with us. I think it's a matter of coordination. The Bureau of Immigration is supposed to be aware of all of them. You have idea on all the transactions.
Yeah, so Gabriel, the thing you're talking about, thank you for that. What we're talking about, and I would tell you from the investigation point of view, so I will take it from the FIU. So when we had an exchange visit to Trinidad and Tobago, FIU, for example. The Trinidad and Tobago FIU is like the U.S. Treasury here. The fencing here is part of the part of the Treasury. It's part of the Ministry of Finance. There is also part of the Ministry of Finance. But my friend, the FIU is even stronger than the Ministry of Finance. The Ministry of Finance not even put foot. Okay, but in that, one thing I admire there is they have access to all the registry. They have the access to the birth and death registry. They have access. The only gray area is tax, where it got to be a legal instrument that give you access. But they have access to companies registry. They have access to all that. In my work, I still do financial crime. I do financial crimes in America for media.
No, we understand.
Social media policy. I won't call it entity, but these are top part of the top 5 or top 10 financial institutions in this country. When you're doing your investigation, you have to. There's a lot of documentation, but you can sit down right in your office. You get all this documentation. You get access to everything. Now, in Liberia, our investigation, sometimes you got to send your investigator, the analyst, on the field to go look for places.
So that's a digital problem.
It requires transportation, and sometimes you don't even have the funding. You don't have the vehicle, you don't have the funding to pay these people with. But what I'm trying to stress is you have to go out and find out. It's not peculiar to Liberia, please. Okay, this is a third world problem. But you got to find the information. Sometimes you don't find the information. So sometimes it even takes a longer time to investigate a case because you have to have the information. You have to have the primary information. You have to have the secondary information. You have to have the tail level information. And a lot of the times you easier get the tail level information than even the primary information or the secondary information. All right.
Yeah,
I know we're about to close.
Yes,
I think
we are about to close. We are about to close,
minutes.
Gabriel. But this is where I'm having my own. I usually get this article or report to share with students to see how best to do policy analysis and review on it.
Mm-hmm.
This is where I'm having my own concern about Liberia or West Africa. The GABA report is there, and you look at whole AU report on illicit financial flow. You realize that this report I'm talking about in 2020 report we're talking about, it is stated clearly that in West Africa country you have about 2,755 cases. Out of the 2,755 cases reported in 2018, only 145 were adjudicated. To tell you, in the region,
it's a corruption problem.
We are building a dead house. We're building a dead house and not doing anything. So if you reported, this is why I'm having a question earlier. If you reported 2,755 cases, and of that you only adjudicated 145 in a year, then you are going nowhere. And there's no political will, there's no policy will to do it. At least if you can prosecute just 10% of this, which will be like 200 cases, but you cannot reach to 10% of the cases reported were not adjudicated. What could be the reason? What are some of the problems? How do we solve this? And you know that this is taking huge of your resources. Huh? If you take $88 billion is leaving while you're receiving $1 billion in aid. So annually. So what are you thinking about? How do you solve this problem? It's a leakage.
Yeah, so for example, so let me
maybe take 2 minutes to answer that, then we can go to the comments.
Maybe let me close on answering your question, because I think we're running out of time, right? Or we're about to reach our time.
Yeah, we have.
But Depu, you were also working in Liberia as I was. And in as much as you are working with you were very astute, because you're one of the person who was on the FIU board who gave me some of the hard questions, like you are doing right now. Very astute guy working in the government, like myself. I wouldn't leave myself out. Agent of change and wanting the right thing to be done, even when nobody is watching. That you can put your life even on the line to make sure you do the right thing. Okay, so I will say this again, and I will say it always. Liberia is supposed to be a very good country. Liberia has resources. Liberia has money. All right. But what we've been lacking since Charlie King time is that leader. It is that leader who will put the foot on the ground, because in management, I believe in top-down vision, bottom-up management. What you rain down, and having taught auditing for a while too, I believe that the tune at the top, and having worked in Liberia with the GMA, with the FIU, with other things, I have some reason to say this, right? That we need that leader. It can be now. It can be next year. But we need that leader who will exercise absolute political will to fight corruption and make sure good governance and institute the rule of law. That will strengthen most of our institutions. That alone will strengthen most of us, like you and myself. All right, to move our country. We'll still have problems. We can eliminate corruption. We can eliminate illicit financial flows. But we do have the institutions. We do have the laws, even though some of them need to be revamped here and there. But we do have the institutions. We do have the laws. We have the people. What is the direction? It is the tune. It is the tune at the top that we don't have. That is why even people from the great West, America or England, Liberians who go with their good knowledge, falls within the pit of what is going on in Liberia. All right? So until we get that, it is going to be challenging. We're going to make this one less step forward and we'll take 2 steps backward, one less step forward and take 2 steps backward. So the solution and answer to all your questions and the answer to our question as a country, in my own way, this is what I'm concluding with. Until we get that leader who will exercise the political will to really fight corruption, to ensure that good governance work, to ensure that the rule of law work, we'll take 2 steps forward, we'll take 10 steps backward. We'll continue around that vicious cycle. That's my closing statement.
All right, thank you for me, and I think I appreciate your candid opinion, and I thank you. With your experience, we can do that. One of the recommendations which I want to make here today is that the international body or regional body responsible for anti-money laundering and financial transparency, I think it's good for us to also be looking at them in terms of how are they responding. I know most often the international protocol can be too much, but if we try to see how best to look at these things, are very careful. For example, if we have a reporting criteria, the EU does that, and you are aware of it, that would this report or this aid for this development for this year will depend on your reporting on this issue. Until you can report on this one, we will not give you the report. So these are some of the things that we need to have ourselves prepared and also look at it. And we can look at international body, we can do it, we can have a domestic criteria. For the Ministry of Finance and also LRA, I think the issue of tax clearance is very much important now. Business registration and tax clearing as a precondition to winning any bid under the procurement law, when that was enforced by the procurement PPCC, that also helped us to improve the level of tax payment. So if we continue to have this system in place, you cannot win this bid unless you bring your report, tax clearance, and everything. It will help us, and I think we can make progress. It is true, the political will have to be there, the tax have to be willing to know that, look, I need to open up instead of just keeping my door closed. So for me, for my parting comment, I would say it is time for Liberians to open up. We can do it individually, we can do it as an institution, and wherever we find ourselves. Liberian businesses, some of the businesses, all of us need to try our best to see how best we can make our system transparent. We digitize what we do. People come out and give comment and send their view. Like that, there will be improvement in the system. And I know with the LRA, current LRA leadership, I think they're doing something. They can ask customers to give their feeling, their view on their website. And they are also taking this into consideration. We need to do that in the Ministry of Commerce, the Bureau of Concession, the NRC. All of these places are places that we need to go up to. So thank you very much for the time.
Yeah, no, thank both of you. And I think you guys give a good in-depth analysis on this whole illicit financial flow. I don't think we have all the problem. We have all the solution. I don't think we any of us do individually. I think both of you said something. Well, on Depu specifically, he mentioned in terms of institution. Individually, I don't think anybody can, and move an inch in terms of curbing this illicit money flow out of the country. But we need to build institution, put the laws in place. We do have the law on books, right? The problem that we have, whether it's our banking sector or even the judiciary, is that we have good laws on books, but we do not implement them. We do not follow. We just write them just for writing sake. In terms of theoretical standpoint, they're just there. But in terms of practically enforcing them and implementing them, we don't do that, and that's what's causing us all these problems. If we're reporting a lot of suspicious activities, we should investigate them, give the various institutions the autonomy to be able to do their work, right? Instead of people fighting from within, give the various institutions the autonomy to do their work effectively, and allow them to do what they're supposed to do. But we have laws on books, we don't implement them. And I think Alex, it was you that mentioned there was this infighting. Sometimes you will go, investigate a case, and people within your own organization will fight you as well. It's part of corruption, right? That's what leads to corruption. Maybe you don't know why that person is fighting you. It could be your boss. You don't know who's in your boss pocket. You don't know if he knows that person who case you're investigating, right? So institution needs to be built, but within those institutions, there has to be autonomy. Give those institutions the autonomy to do their work, but also allow them to implement the laws that are on the books within those institutions to do their work. I think for me, I think that's where I will leave it. With everything with Liberia, that's what we always hear. We don't implement. We don't implement. We don't implement. We don't implement. What's the point of passing laws? So for me on this case, that's where I want to leave it. I don't think I have uh anything else to add to that. Implementation. We need to implement, and implement. That's the only way we're going to move an inch on this needle. Thank you.
Thank you, Gabriel.
Yeah.